a Ukrainian hacker group releasing data that shows Russia has been supplying fighter jets, or there's a deal in place to supply 48 advanced Su-35 aircraft to Iran in the lead up, what to many believe is going to be a round two with Israel. When asked about, Sergei Lavrov himself had this to say: Russia will meet Iran's military needs despite sanctions. He didn't specify what that would be. They're not going to listen to sanctions. They're not going to follow them. We will develop military and technical cooperation with Iran despite UN sanctions. We have no restrictions.
A Su-35 aircraft sale has long been in the works for Iran. And from what we know, it was delayed primarily because Iran was dragging their feet. That there were, at one point, a year ago more, there were trainers because Russia is very methodical. It makes sure that the pilots of the prospective nation buying them are fully up to speed first on trainer aircraft before they graduate up to the most advanced, because you don't want to lose one of them in training, quite obviously. But then Iran didn't carry forward the deal. Russia was waiting on that, and the Su-35s aren't being used so extensively during the Ukraine conflict that Russia is certainly perfectly capable of meeting, the terms of such a deal. But it's going to be a process, just so you understand that, right? If Su-35s did, let's say, arrive in Tehran next week, which is not likely, but Iranian pilots would not be able to fly those off into the sky to confront Israel or the United States any more than Ukrainian pilots a year ago were able to jump in F-16s and fly into the contact line in Ukraine. Considerably, the Su-35 is a much more advanced aircraft as well. But we've heard Iranian officials in the last 2 weeks talk about S-400s also being on the way, of MiG-29s, right, and a older but capable aircraft, roughly comparable to the Russian F-16, either already in Iran. There have been sightings of them in Iran, or on the way. And I'm sure other supplies. Russia has been clear before that it would meet the military needs of Iran, and that it was Iran that was, not interested, at least until the last attack by Israel and the United States. Now, there's some indications that Iran is going through. Now, Iran is what Putin described as a difficult country to be friends with, right? They have their pride. They have a belief in their own sovereignty and independence, and it's understandable. They don't want to be particularly dependent on any one country. And it's also understandable that they would be hesitant about depending too much on Russia. In the past, Russia and Iran have, in the distant past, have had confrontations. In the more recent past, if you want to go back to around 2010, when Dmitry Medvedev was president, and Russia and China both agreed to sanctions against Iran, although, to be fair, that was probably mostly because that was what would have forestalled a U.S. attack on Iran at the time. But there was a deal to deliver S-400s to Iran, and or was it S-300s? One of the two systems, an advanced air defense system to Iran, and Russia kept Iran waiting for years because of these sanctions, and it was mostly, of course, to please the U.S. and Israel, because at that time, the policy of the Russian government was to try to blend into the West, right? That's what they wanted. So it is understandable that Iran would fear trusting and depending on another country too much. Russia is not the country it was in 2010. And I actually certainly agree with what your last guest was talking about being locked in a permanent conflict with the West. And if the Kremlin doesn't understand that now, then they should, and they had better catch up with the game. But I think they do, or at least enough of the people in the Kremlin do. And the truth of the matter is, if Russia and China and Iran and other countries, right, North Korea, Venezuela, so forth, do not hang together now, they will be picked off one by one, right? The U.S. sees a closing geopolitical window of opportunity to extend and maintain its hegemony before the global transfer of wealth via trade results in far too strong China, Russia, and other countries for them to, go into those countries' backyards. And for China, it's probably already too late for that. So Iran was obviously targeted a few months ago, right? There was a belief that a decapitation strike, together with Israeli intelligence activities on the ground, would bring down the Israeli government. The Iranian government. It did not. And the decapitation strikes were only partially successful. And whatever Mossad was cooking up for covert action and terrorists and separatists and whatever on the ground was nowhere near enough. On top of that, Iran's long-range strikes eventually exhausted and overwhelmed Israeli and Western air defenses over Israel, because the single greatest Achilles heel of the U.S. and the West right now is their over-reliance on one less than perfect air defense system, the Patriot, and their critical shortage of the PAC-3 interceptors for the Patriot. And that is ultimately why they had to call off the last war on Iran. Trump came in, dropped some bombs, declared victory, and declared a ceasefire. And because they didn't have enough air defense interceptors, and air defense was already being overwhelmed. And that is why it will be difficult for them to begin another war, because I can't imagine in just a few months they've built up enough. We know their production rate of PAC-3 interceptors. It's 600 a year by Raytheon, right? So they must, if they are to begin a new war against Iran, then they must have some new cunning plan to end it quickly. Another decapitation strike, some type of color revolution on the ground, or maybe they're sure they can target and hit all of Iran's missile launchers.
Supposedly, Israel has been sending a message via Russia to Iran saying that they don't want to attack. Even the foreign minister of Iran has said that a phone call between Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin led to Netanyahu wanting to tell Iran that they are not going to attack. Arachi, the foreign minister, said they're perfectly capable of deception, and look at the ceasefire now. Not even 24 hours in Israel is killing Palestinians.
Yeah, I don't know who you would consider more untrustworthy, Netanyahu or Trump, but I can't throw either of them. And so, I mean, I certainly wouldn't trust them at all. And there's no reason to, right? I mean, Iran was lured into a attempted surprise attack last time because they engaged in diplomacy with the United States. Hamas leaders were just assassinated in Qatar while being there on the process, the pretext of examining a new U.S. deal. And already we see, this ceasefire was always going to last up until they got, the hostage exchange. And then, there was never any chance really of it lasting more than that. There was absolutely no way that Israel was ever going to allow Arab or Indonesian peacekeepers on the ground in their greater Zion. So it's not a surprise. And while there are military considerations, like I said, why it would be very difficult, if not prohibitive, for the U.S. and Israel to engage right now into another conflict with Iran. And the biggest one is the Achilles heel is air defense, and specifically the lack of air defense interceptors. We have no reason to believe that they have somehow magically ramped up production, and it will make it very hard. That doesn't mean that they won't settle on some cunning plan that they believe will work, like they did the first time, right? That's the danger, that their lack of military realism about their capabilities there. But we can say that about many things before. So Israel can say that, but it certainly doesn't mean that Iran or Russia or anyone else should trust them for, even a split second on this. I certainly would. But the reality is even if everything we've heard, right? Russia has been sending military transports to Iran. There are plenty of reports on that in the past 2 weeks. We don't know what they contain, right? It could be normal, already contracted stuff. It could be brand new S-400s and what else, air defense systems. But regardless, this will take time. This is not something they can erect in a day, right? What Russia has is an integrated, interconnected, multi-layered air defense and electronic warfare network, the best in the world, as has certainly been demonstrated over the past few years. Oh, and while not 100%, it's as close as anything, it's the best in the world. And what happened in Israel, clearly shows that their Iron Dome and David's boomerang and everything else wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. Meanwhile, Russia's air defense has withstood, multiple rounds of Western cruise missiles and ballistic missiles and daily hundreds of drone attacks directed by U.S. satellites and everything else. So, but it's not going to magically appear overnight. It will take time to construct it, to integrate it, and to train up the personnel to properly use these advanced systems. So if the U.S. and Israel intend another deceptive quick attack, then anything that Russia and or China, because there have also been some reports of Chinese military transports coming to Iran, will only help so much. It takes time. Whether we're talking the air defense, whether we're talking Russian fighter aircraft, it's not something that can be integrated overnight. As we've clearly seen is impossible to do for the West's proxy in Ukraine. All these fancy systems have to be operated by their own personnel. And even then, without integrated systems, they don't work very, interconnected, multi-layered systems, they have very limited effectiveness.
I have a question, Mark. When it comes to this question of especially the older models, the MiGs and even the air defenses that Russia is supplying Iran, I've heard reports out of Iran that have said that there are like Russian engineers and logistical support. Is this true? And does that at least help speed up the process for these kind of weapons to be more ready-made or are ready to use in combat? Or is it that it still takes some time? I think Israel is probably a little concerned that they might not have a surprise attack up their sleeve this time around. But nonetheless, as you said, and as everyone that's come on this show, and I truly believe this too, something is going to come eventually because Netanyahu has not let go, or Israel has not let go of this regime change goal. So your thoughts about this?
Yeah. So, I mean, doubtless there are Russian military and military technical people on the ground. That is actually an essential. it's not something that would necessarily speed up the process. It is an essential part of the process. It wouldn't happen at all without it. I mean, we know that Russia has lots of personnel on the ground. For instance, it's scientists and engineers and workers at Bushehr, Iran's nuclear power plant. And even during the last strikes, Russia was quite clear that they were not removing their people from Bushehr. And they warned Israel, don't you dare. Our people are there. Do not hit that, right? And they didn't. But regardless, I do not expect a situation where Russia declares military forces on the ground in Iran as some type of a human tripwire, right? That is not the type of strategic partnership agreement that Russia and Iran have, as far as we know. It has no mutual defense clause like the one with North Korea does. Although, again, we're told, that Russia offered that to Iran and they turned it down. Likewise with the Chinese. Unfortunately, the level of alliance, trust, and integration between the three of them is still something that is not what it should be, and it needs to be. And hopefully they will make progress on making it so. Because if they don't, that, like I said, they will be picked off. But it was discovered, that Russia was a lot harder. The Blinken-Sullivan administration discovered that as much as they imagined they could take down Russia and pivot to China, that they couldn't. And then obviously Israel and the Trump administration believed they could they could quickly take down Iran, right? Pivot to Iran and then have Europe hold Russia in place and pivot to China. And obviously that didn't work out either. Now it appears that the Trump administration is looking for some low-hanging fruit for a victory, right, in Venezuela. But if they did that, right, Venezuela obviously has a much smaller and less capable military than Iran, right, or certainly more so, than Russia. They have very limited. They do have some Russian S-300s, some older systems, I believe, and some older air defense. But I mean, no one has any doubt in their minds that if the U.S. moved in force on Venezuela, that they could decapitate, with decapitation strikes, take out the Venezuelan government, and with the help of, opposition oligarchs and the like, who would raise their own right-wing armies and so forth, that, they could take out the Venezuelan government. The question then becomes, can they actually, though, occupy the country and govern it? That's another story, and depends on, the passion of the Venezuelan people who support Maduro for the continuation of the Bolivarian revolution. I'm not in a place to judge by that. I will only say that I'm always afraid in such situations because the U.S., the UK, Mossad, even Turkish intelligence involved have proven extremely successful in the past at covert co-option of top generals and political figures and getting troops to stand down. I mean, they had some 90% of the Syrian army, right, of 200,000 strong, that basically stood down and laid down their weapons and ran home under the order of their generals and officers. If they can do that in Syria, then unfortunately, their possibility of doing that in Venezuela, exists as well. So I don't know. I have not been to Venezuela, and I can't say. But people who were on the ground in Syria didn't see that one coming either. So we don't know. We don't know. Right. But it's doubtless that the Trump administration is probably looking for an easy win. They see Venezuela as a low-hanging fruit. It has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. And you can bet that there are people in the U.S. and the other Western deep states, the blob, if you will, who look at this like a geopolitical chess match. Oh, you think you're going to take our pawn or our knight or whatever in Ukraine away from us? Well, bam, there's your pawn in Syria. Bam, there's your pawn in Nepal. Bam, Venezuela.
Indonesia, right? Indonesia,
Right.
everywhere. Yeah.
We're in the long game already. I mean, we are in the conflict for global world order, which is taking place militarily, economically, cyber. Certainly in the information sphere. Right. It's not just one conflict. It is a multiplicity of conflicts, as is appropriate for trying to stop the birth of a multipolar world order. We're in that game. We're well in that game, and Venezuela, what's going on there is just another part, one more battle in what will be ultimately a decades-long conflict, and that we'll all be blessedly lucky that doesn't end in nuclear Armageddon at the end of it.
Israel has already taken out 7 Palestinians, not within 24 hours of that ceasefire. And then, Mark, you had the incredible optics of Trump's very brief visit to the Knesset in Israel, as well as, of course, that absolutely pathetic summit that we saw
in Egypt.
In Egypt. And I want to just play a bit of this commentary about weapons, which speaks to, I think, this trust element in this broader conflagration you're talking about. Because when you hear the U.S. president talk like this is the one thing that Trump does. He just tells you straight up that this is all part of the agenda. Here we go.
I can tell you we have weapons that nobody's ever dreamt of. I only hope we never have to use them. I rebuilt the military. I was proud to do it, but some of the things I hated to do. I hated certain of the weapons because the level of power is so enormous. It's so dangerous, so bad. But we have to do what we have to do. We make the best weapons in the world, and we've got a lot of them. And we've given a lot to Israel, frankly. And Bibi would call me so many times, can you get me this weapon, that weapon, that weapon? Some of them I never heard of, Bibi, and I made them. But we'd get them here, wouldn't we? And they are the best. They are the best. But you used them well. It also takes...
So you used them well. We gave them weapons, of course.
All the military. I don't know what those weapons are. I have no idea.
All the bluster about them being the best weapons and all of that. What the truth here is that he is admitting straight up, giving Israel weapons and saying they use them well. And how do they use them? Well, they use them on Gaza.
We facilitated the genocide.
The genocide, and of course the war with Iran, and of course everything else. Lebanon and Syria.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is a neo-colonial diktat. I don't expect it to last any more than remember, we went through all of this actually before. I mean, there was a very similar ceasefire when Trump first came into office, and that fell apart even sooner than this one did, because at least they pushed through the hostage exchange. Although I understand that the Palestinian hostages that Israel has, it has already reneged and is deciding who they will let go and who they will not let go now.